Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to another episode of Ask an OpenShift Admin. I am Chris Short, host for the most here on Red Hat Live Streaming. I'm joined by the one and only Andrew Sullivan and fellow teammate Mark Schmitt. How are you today, y'all?
Doing great. I'm impressed with your little mini crisis you just dealt with seamlessly there. Of
you like that?
Hit the intro bumper button and then oh no, coffee, and you
coffee is now here.
Yeah, well, that was impressive.
Very important.
Hey, I mean, everything's on wheels for a reason, right? The desk, the chair, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. Speaking of which, when are you moving back down to your original office?
It's probably October-ish, I'm thinking, right? Okay. Like once it gets cold again.
Okay.
Basically,
well, you got the fire in behind you.
Exactly. Yeah. No, the fire has started back up here because it has become September, which is the magical month of hoodies. So the fire is back in place.
Well, it's after Labor Day, and I'm wearing gray, so it's not white. So I'm good.
Fair
right?
enough. Yeah. Like, sure. Whatever, man. I don't know where that rule came from or why.
I don't either, actually. That's I should look that up. Anyways, so hello everyone. Welcome to the Ask an OpenShift Administrator Office Hour. So this is one of our office hour series of streams here on Red Hat Live Streaming, which means that we are here, much like if you ever had a teacher or a manager, somebody like that who had office hours, right? We're here for you. We're here so that you can come in, ask whatever questions, talk about whatever things happen to be top of your mind. And us, so Chris and I, and today Mark, of course, are here to answer those questions. So we also have, with every show, we have a theme, we have a topic that we like to talk about. And today I am very happy to welcome Mark to the Ask an OpenShift Admin Hour for the first time to talk about OpenShift at the Edge. Mark, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Sure, Mark Schmitt. Been at Red Hat for a little over 3 years now. Prior to joining Red Hat, I spent many a year in the telco industry, wireless telco, doing everything from working for a network equipment provider to an actual wireless carrier, and then spent a lot of years in a consulting role doing mostly system integration for the large wireless telcos. And with that came a wave of virtualization within that industry, and that kind of led me down the road to Red Hat, and been working here with OpenStack and OpenShift as a TMM, like I said, going on 3 years now. Mostly now focused on OpenShift at the edge and the various use cases therein.
Yeah, Mark. So funny story. Mark and I actually started. He started 2 weeks before me, and then I started in the beginning of August, and then Brian Tanis started 2 weeks after that. Mm-hmm. So it was like the string of the three of us all joining the team right in a row.
Yep.
And now Brian has moved on to bigger and better things, namely being a developer evangelist. So
yes,
he's in the big shower in the sky.
Big shower in the sky. I was about to say the dev evangelism trying to come up with a shower pun, but yeah.
So all right. Yeah. Anyways, we won't pick on him. He's not here to defend himself.
Exactly.
So we won't pick on him too much. But yeah, so happy to have you, Mark. I know it's fun when we chat about your experiences in the telco industry and with OpenStack. A long time ago, I was an OpenStack user. I'm happy to say I'm fully recovered. So
I'm sorry.
Christian, yeah, you only pay for the entire OpenShift, but you only need the edge.
Just that little edge piece.
Yeah.
Right? This is why I want, every time we say edge, I want there to be an echo effect. But I didn't have time to figure that out.
It's like an AI thing or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. So as is tradition here on the Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hour, I like to start off after we do our introductions and banter here with some top of mind topics. So these are things that have come up in the recent past, things that I feel are important or maybe topical, or things that you all should be aware of as administrators of OpenShift. So the first one that I want to talk about is one that we've been batting around quite a bit, and that is something we talked about, was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? We talked about it recently, and that is API deprecation.
Yes.
So we first talked about this briefly when we did the What's New in OpenShift 4.8 stream. And that was, we talked about it because one of the things that I thought was really cool and interesting is you can see which APIs are being used. So I'm going to share my screen just so that we can see what this looks like. There we go. Hey, I got the right one on the first try.
Hey.
Hopefully that's big enough for everybody to see. If not, just let me know. So with OpenShift 4.8, we have an API specifically that tells us which APIs are being used. So if I do an OC get API requests, it'll return back this. Oh, of course you don't. Request counts. Oh, I was close. Remember last time I did this, I completely borked it, and it took me a little while to find it. So we have this get API request counts, and it returns back all of these different APIs that are in use, how often they're in use. If we scroll all the way up to the top here, so requests in current hour, requests in the last 24 hours, all of that other stuff. So you can see, for example, this API request counts API is pretty popular for some reason. I have not done it 507 times. So, here, cluster role bindings, of course, you would expect the RBAC stuff to be, pretty widely used. So the interesting part here is we have, for example, this ingresses.v1 beta 1 extensions, and you can see this column here, 1.22, represents which release it's being removed in. So this is important for a couple of reasons.
That could be a future release or a past one.
Yeah. So this is important for a number of reasons. So one, if you're using one of these APIs, effectively, you won't be able to upgrade the cluster. So when, 4.8? So when 4.9 comes out, that would block an upgrade because that API is in use.
Right.
So, of course, we Red Hat, we're aware of this. We're working on this with all of our, you would expect the ingresses to be one of ours. So we're working on updating all of our operators, all of our stuff to make sure that before that time comes, all of our stuff will be not using those removed APIs. Our partners are also doing the same.
This affects everybody equally.
Yes. So just be aware, if you have created your own operators, if you're using any of these APIs in any of your own codes, or if you have partners, you may want to reach out and poke your partner and basically say, hey, are you guys aware of these things? We need to take this into account.
You can ask them if they're ready for Kubernetes 122 and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to make too big a deal out of this, but it is kind of a big deal because, again, it will prevent the updating of your cluster to the next version.
And one of the main reasons you're hearing this from us first potentially is because, well, we're going to be one of the first to update to 122. So these things need to change before you do that. And that's why I'm beating the drum in the community, and I'm going to beat the drum here as well. Deprecations happen in Kubernetes, and that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing because a lot of them are being upgraded to stable as opposed to beta.
Agreed. It only took 22 versions.
That's it.
So reading through the chat here, Christian, you would be biased towards Mark's shirt. That is one of the GitOps shirts. Emmanuel, congratulations on passing your exam there. Nice work.
That's awesome. The CKA is not trivial. Neither is the OpenShift cert. So
yeah. So definitely congratulations. And I will move on to our next top of mind topic, which is so this is a question that comes up frequently enough that we actually published a blog post on it.
Nice. Always like those.
Yeah.
Grab the link here.
So you got it? Okay.
I can get it. Yeah.
Well, then I'm going to share my screen so that we can all look at it together.
Yes.
Let's see, share this guy and paste that in there. So a while ago, you can see, not quite a year ago, we published this blog post that I think gets overlooked fairly often. And it is basically what are all of the components, like the specific components inside of OpenShift from upstream projects. So for example, we say OpenShift has, the monitoring service or the logging service. Well, what does that actually mean? right? The monitoring service is made up of Prometheus and Grafana. The logging service is made up of Elasticsearch, Fluentd, and Kibana, so on and so forth. So this blog post kind of walks through each one of those projects that make up different components, different features, different functions inside of OpenShift. So nothing really, surprising or outstanding here. This is just a lot of times I have come across, account teams who are asking us in the BU, like, hey, my customer's security team needs to know, what is the component or what is the thing used for this or used for that type of stuff, because they want to know, what is it, what version is it, so that they can compare it against any, kind of vulnerability or other databases that they have. So this is a great starting point for that. I always encourage folks to look at this whenever they're trying it out. One thing to point out, I'll put on my, I do have marketing in my title officially, technical marketing. I'll put on my marketing hat of, we take all of these components, what makes OpenShift is we take all of these components, we combine them together into a product that is fully tested for integration and all that other stuff. So it's kind of neat to see all of these things come together into one thing.
Yeah, it's always when you look at all the projects involved, right? It's like, oh wow, you did pick everything, like one thing from every box on the CNCF trail map kind of deal. Yeah, and then added more.
All right, I'm going to switch back to the terminal for this next one.
All right.
So another question that I answer fairly regularly is like, hey, can I do this? Can I customize this? Can I change this? Can I modify this when I'm doing a cluster deployment? So if we do, and things like, hey, can I change or how do I change? What's the setting to change the amount of CPU or memory that's dedicated to, say, a control plane node in vSphere IPI? So it's pretty easy to figure out. So if we do an OpenShift install, and then we do explain, if I can type, install config.
Typing is optional.
Yeah, again, I cannot talk and type at the same time. My fingers want to do what my mouth is doing. So this, yeah, so this output is effectively all of the things, all of the options that are available inside of the install config.yaml. So again, it's OpenShift install, explain, install config. And then from here, just like with OC explain or kubectl explain, I can go through and I can dig into each one of these. So install config.compute. And it'll tell me, okay, what are all of the options available inside of here? So compute dot, let's go with platform.
Okay.
And then, okay, I'm using the vSphere platform dot vSphere. And okay, well, if I want to modify any of these fields, I can do so inside of here. So for compute, remember compute is going to represent the worker nodes. So if I want to change the default size of the worker nodes provisioned by an IPI install, I would do, so compute.platform.vSphere. Say memory megabytes, and I can specify, hey, I want you to provision worker nodes, right? That initial machine set should have 24 gigabytes of memory or whatever that happens to be.
Yeah, whatever.
I want to use a 1 terabyte operating system disk instead of a 120 gigabyte disk, so on and so forth. So really helpful for finding all of those things, especially. So if I do an OpenShift install explain, install config dot, so I want to install config dot platform. And then inside of here, I want to look for bare metal. So bare metal IPI has a whole bunch of options available to it. And to me, they can be very confusing. And even inside of the documentation, not all of these are thoroughly fleshed out. So it's an easy way for me to look and see like, oh, do I need to set this provisioning bridge? What is this provisioning DHCP range? Do I need to create that? Do I need to provide that? So a ton of options in here. If there's, see here, valid values, are there specific things that I can provide or that are only, valid fields, etc. So a helpful one there. If you just happen to be exploring around, want to know what options are, stuff like that. I found the the explain command to be extremely helpful just in general. So like if I do an OC explain API request counts, it gives me back all of the different fields that come back from that and an explanation of what each one of those is. So I can see how this is an object. So I can do the same thing with spec. Oops, if I could spell it correctly. So number of users to report, you can see it's an integer and stuff like that. So if I do, we'll do status, because I think that's the one that we care about. Yeah. So with status, this one explains what each one of those columns we were looking at in that previous output represents. These are kind of obvious, but not all of them are all of the time. And also, not every object outputs every field to the command line. So if I do like let's see, explain node and status. So you can see there's a huge number of things available here for a node. And if I just do an OC get node, there's only a couple of them that show up. So this is one of those ways that you can see like, hey, maybe I want to expose certain fields. Like, so if I do that -O and provide the specific fields or stuff like that, or if I want to do kind of a raw query or output the whole thing, what are all of the fields? What's all the data that I'm going to get returned back? So again, super helpful to use the explain commands, whether it's OC explain, OpenShift install explain, etc. Just checking chat real quick. Will Kubernetes 1.22 be in the new major version of OpenShift? So 1.22 will be in OpenShift 4.9. So you can see this is a the window I'm showing here. This is an OpenShift 4.8.5 cluster, and it's running Kubernetes version 1.21.1. So generally with each OpenShift update, we have a version update to Kubernetes as well. I think the one exception to that was OpenShift 3.8, which was never shipped. I think we skipped 2 versions of Kubernetes when we went from 3.7 to 3.9, something like that.
That makes sense, kind of. Yeah.
So yeah, Chris, I see you responded there in chat of it'll be 4.9.
So yeah, that's why those deprecations are important sooner rather than later, because 4.9 is the next release.
Definitely. Yeah. And so we've talked, just to piggyback on that for a moment, we've talked briefly before about how upstream Kubernetes is moving to the 3 annual releases. So OpenShift has not yet done that. That is targeted for next year,
right?
When we'll start to adopt that schedule. So we are still on a 4 annual release cycle. So approximately every 3 months, every quarter, there will be an OpenShift release. I say approximately because there's any number of reasons that it could get delayed out or anything like that.
Yeah, we've had things break at the last second too, and
yes,
it happens, right? Like developing software, it happens.
So yeah, speaking of which, I think we're on the cusp of 4.8 upgrades being unblocked.
Yes, we should be close, I feel like.
Yeah. So the next thing I'll talk about here, and I'm going to switch back to sharing my browser window.
Khaled says, I wish there was a Kate spot so that I could ask it to explain what is wrong. That would be nice, right? Like, find me a failure.
So I get asked, I would say once a month, I get asked about OpenShift and Vrealize.
Okay.
So Vrealize automation, which is a VMware product, right? It's part of their whole suite of things in the Vrealize realm. It is a method of deploying virtual machines into an application. And oftentimes, because there's also a guest agent and stuff like that, that also means doing things like installing packages, etc. So Vrealize is a very powerful suite of tools. I've previous employer, I wrote a plugin to use Vrealize to configure, control, right, and consume storage devices, stuff like that. Super powerful. It uses a JavaScript dialect, just a scripting language. So we get asked fairly regularly about, hey, is it possible to use OpenShift, or excuse me, Vrealize automation to provision OpenShift? And the answer to that is yes, but not in any official way from Red Hat, and really not an official way from VMware either. So the only pseudo official thing that we have from VMware is this Fling. So you can see it's from November of 2019. So we're coming up on 2 years old here. So remember, Flings are effectively a proof of concept type of thing, or a pre-supported, or what do we call them? Dev preview. Yeah. So it's, hey, we can publish something. I think vSphere on ARM is a Fling right now. So we can publish something, we can get it out there, and we can see how popular it is, how much people want to use it, whether or not it's sustainable from our model, stuff like that. And I'm speaking in the perspective of VMware here. But anyways, so this Fling was published a while ago. I don't remember if it works with OpenShift. Yeah, so OpenShift version 3.11. So it's not even OpenShift 4 compatible. However, one of the VMware folks recently published to their blog effectively a way to do this. So this is Dean Lewis. So you can see just a little over 2 months ago, published a deploying OpenShift IPI using VRA. So VRA being Vrealize automation. So if you can walk through this blog post, it's fairly lengthy. He goes into pretty good depth here that explains one method to deploy OpenShift using Vrealize automation. So if you are a customer, joint customer who's using all of that, be sure, if and you're interested in this is a great way to check it out. Chris, I trust your copy and links.
Yes.
Yeah.
Copy pasta is fully cooked.
Thank you, sir. So I've just got 2 more that I'm going to quickly go through before we talk with Mark here. So this one gets brought up pretty frequently, and that is, how can I resize control plane nodes? So control plane nodes, resizing any node is interesting with OpenShift 4. And I say that because in theory, and especially with IPI, we exert some positive control over the configuration of those nodes. So for example, if I want a machine that is 4 CPUs and 8 gigabytes of RAM, I create a machine set and say, hey, deploy me all of these machines. If I need a machine that has a different amount of resources, I would create a new machine set and provision machines out of it. Alternatively, I can edit the existing machine set and then basically do a scale up, scale down. So scale up to provision new resources, and then scale down so that it removes those old ones. Or you can specify like explicitly to remove these ones, that type of stuff. We covered that before as well here on the stream. If I'm using UPI or a non-integrated platform, then the method is slightly different. And specifically, we don't support hot add. It may technically work, but we don't officially support it. So you would want to shut down the node. So do a cordon, do a drain, shut down the node, adjust the resources assigned to it, and then turn it back on and let it come back into the cluster. So for worker nodes, that basically works exactly as you'd expect. It's going to fall in line with all of the parameters. When you do that cordon and drain, it'll make sure that the pod disruption budgets and all that other stuff are adhered to, et cetera. Control plane nodes are a little different.
As always.
Yeah. So this KCS, our control plane node resizing a supported day 2 operation. So with UPI and non-integrated installs, effectively, and you can see here, a rolling date for update for resizing the control plane nodes is possible. So if you do like vSphere UPI, absolutely shut them down one at a time, resize them, turn them back on, and then return them to service. For other platforms, so think AWS, Azure, et cetera, where it's not as simple as right-clicking the virtual machine and saying add CPU,
right?
Where you have to replace it with a whole different machine size. The suggested method is to remove the node. So you're effectively failing a control plane node and then re-provisioning a new one and having it rejoin the cluster. So if we go to docs, and if we look at 4.8 and scroll all the way down here to backup and restore, and we have to go to the not intimidating at all disaster recovery section. And And essentially, we're going in here and we're restoring that cluster, right? Restoring the etcd instance back to the way that it was. Okay. Here, replacing unhealthy etcd member. So this would be the process that you want to follow. So, it's a little intimidating. It is some work in order to do that, but it is possible. And that's literally just the safest way that we can do it. Might it work if you were to just go in and change the instance size or something like that? Maybe, but it's one of those, like, we want to take the safest method possible or suggest the safest method possible. So that way you don't encounter any issues, especially if it's a production system. That's bad.
So can you explain what is a non-integrated install?
Yeah, so you've for a long time, we used to say a bare metal installation.
Right.
And I'm saying we, referring to kind of Red Hat at large. We would say a bare metal installation or sometimes a bare metal UPI installation. And what that was referring to is effectively any OpenShift deployment where in the install config, it was set to platform equals none. So what that means is there's no cloud provider integration. It's not using, the vSphere cloud provider. It's not using the Azure cloud provider, whatever that happens to be. I'm going to check and see if I can. Let me share this real quick. And the goal being, so with a cloud provider integrated install, it means that the cluster has additional awareness of the underlying platform. With a non-integrated or platform agnostic or what we used to call bare metal UPI installation, again, that infrastructure integration isn't there. So things like machine sets or IPI don't exist. I can't provision new nodes because it doesn't understand what that underlying infrastructure is. Infrastructure cluster. So if I look inside of here, so all I did here was OC-get infrastructure, and then the instance is cluster. So here you said you can see the OC-get infrastructure. There's one instance cluster. And then I did an output to YAML so that I can see the full output. Down here in the spec, you can see that my platform here is Azure. That's to be expected. I deployed this cluster to Azure. If I were to create a, so I think this will work. I'm trying to remember if I have an install config that doesn't have. So this one, yeah, that worked well.
I got the I.
Yeah. Oh, it's capital. So this one has platform none. Yeah. So this would deploy a non-integrated cluster. Whereas normally this OWV cluster that I have here, normally I deploy that onto a vSphere platform. And that vSphere platform would then have, the provider integration. So being able to do things like consume PVCs through the storage provisioner, either the entry or the CSI, all that type of stuff. This is why Sully needs to learn YQ. I have a hard enough time with JQ.
Yeah, I didn't even realize there was a YQ, but yes,
yeah,
we need to...
I'm aware of it. Again, it's just,
yeah, it's like fancy stuff that came after we knew everything, right? Like JQ's great to an extent, so don't get me wrong, but now I got YQ.
That also implies that I remember the structure of the file. You notice here that the error here, Christian, is I didn't have a capital S. So it wouldn't have mattered because I still forgot that it was a capital S. Anyways. All right, we will stop sharing that.
All right.
And very quickly, I want to get this done in like less than a minute. So it was highlighted that if you're using an image content source policy to redirect your images to, for example, an offline mirror. So remember, an ICSP, image content source policy, basically says, hey, if you're looking for an image here, redirect automatically over to this other place. So we use that especially with a disconnected install, right, where you mirror all of the content to your offline registry instance, and then on the disconnected network in your install config, you have a image content source policy stanza. So one thing to note is if that registry instance requires authentication, you have to provide those credentials in your cluster level pull secret. Right. So in the pull secret, the one that I just quickly scrolled up past, that's in your install config.yaml, that's where those credentials would be. It is also cluster wide. So pod level pull secrets, depending on what you're doing, may or may not get applied. So you may need to change that cluster level pull secret to include or exclude different characteristics of that install registry. So do note though, and Mark Russell, who is on, he's been on the stream here a couple of times, and he pointed out that replacing the pull secret is no longer an action that requires a node reboot. So it just refreshes cryo. Again, I'm going to use both of those because I'm an equal opportunity offender.
I appreciate your offensiveness.
You know, or it's kube cuddle, kube control, kube CTL.
Quay key.
Yeah, Quay key.
Yeah.
Cubby Coodle. You know, I can come up with these all day.
Cubby Cuddle. That'd be a good one.
Anyways, so yes, it does not require, it no longer requires a node reboot as of 4.5, 4.6. It's been a while. So yeah, it just reloads cryo on the node, and then you are on the nodes, I should say, and then you're good to go with that updated pull secret. Let's see, I see a question here from Hetz.
It's for Mark. So
yeah. So previously you showed how you installed OpenShift 4.7 using libvirt, and showed a page you wrote about it, but I didn't find the URL.
How you installed OpenShift 4.7 using libvirt. It's a blog, right?
Is that ringing a bell, Mark?
It is not.
So I know I did an OKD hack fest. So myself and Justin Pittman did one a while ago, where I showed deploying OKD to libvirt, and I put that into a gist. I'll share that here. So there, I posted that to the chat. Christian, maybe helper nodes. The answer to everything
it was without the assisted installer stuff.
Okay.
So 4.6 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so installing to libvirt is really no different than installing to any other non-integrated platform.
Yep.
So one thing to note, and let me share the browser again so I can show this. I want this one. Share. And now I need to grab my bookmark from over here. So you can deploy OpenShift to any platform that RHEL is supported on. So what I mean by that is OpenShift, you know, and we just saw in the documentation here, go back, you move, go back. So in the documentation here underneath this installing, we explicitly test OpenShift deployed to AWS, Azure, Google, you know, physical servers, IBM Z, Power, right, all of these things. But if you want to install OpenShift to other places, you can. Anything that is a certified or a supported deployment location for RHEL is also a valid deployment location for OpenShift. So two that come to mind immediately: libvirt, of course, if you're deploying as virtual machines straight on RHEL or something like that. Hyper-V is another one that comes up. So if you go to, oops, go back. So if we go to RHEL supported hypervisors, right, and if I click on this guy, as soon as the internet brings up the page here, right, we can see that there's a number of different things available here. It kind of lists all of these: Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, so on and so forth. OpenStack platform all the way back to 10. I think OpenShift only supports 13 and later, maybe 16 and later. Mark, you're the OpenStack expert. So you can deploy OpenShift onto these. And so long as you use that non-integrated, that platform agnostic deployment method, then you are supported within the description, and I'm not logged in, within the description of this particular KCS, which basically says you're fully supported, but if we attribute the error to something with the underlying platform, we may ask you to move to a tested platform, so that way we can eliminate that as a possibility. So you want OpenShift on Hyper-V? Absolutely, yes, right? It is a supported platform for RHEL. You can deploy it inside of there using the non-integrated method. Just be aware of those caveats. And if you haven't posted this, I'll post that in there. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
No worries. So libvirt falls into that category as well. All right. I know I was like 6 minutes instead of 1 minute. So, but that's okay. It was questions, and we love questions.
Yes, we do.
So again, don't hesitate to ask whatever questions are top of mind for you all. Again, we're talking about Edge today, but don't let that limit your imagination and the things you want to ask about. So Mark,
Yes.
Edge, I hear it's a thing these days.
It is a thing. It is a thing these days. Yeah. So I have some slides. Let me see if I can't share my screen. It shouldn't take too long to go through these.
I'll stop sharing mine then.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just easier to talk with slides.
It is. It might be easier.
I'm trying to figure out how I can do a drawing.
Because live? I think
yeah, because I have my daughter, who is an artist. Mm-hmm. We recently got her an iPad, so she's been drawing with the Apple Pencil on that.
Right.
But she has one of those USB tablets. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a way I can if I can plug it into here and do drawings on the fly. Not that I'm an artist, but I'm pretty good at drawing squares and arrows. Which is most diagrams.
You could always just pull up
the Google diagram thing?
The Google Sheets thingy, and then there's draw.io.
Yeah. All right, Zoom is giving me difficulties here. Do you want to?
Zoom is being difficult. I can.
Yeah.
So another question from Hetz, where to actually report bugs with single node OpenShift, Bugzilla or another place. So yeah, BZ would be perfectly fine. It'll make it to the right team. You can also use to the account team. They can open Jira tickets.
The slides go. I have them, I swear.
Yeah, it's not letting me allow Zoom to change the Zoom privacy settings for some reason.
Oh yeah, we forgot to test screen sharing before we It's okay, folks.
Yep. So if you just want to pull those up, we'll roll through these pretty quickly.
It's in the Zoom chat, Chris.
Yep.
Thank you.
Apologies.
Find Zoom chat. Oh my God. What is going on with Zoom?
I told you, see, before we started, I said this is the Mondayest Wednesday that I've had in a long time.
It has been a really weird morning for me too. So yeah. All right. I have them. And I'm going to share them, I promise. Let me do
thing. Hetz, I'm going to see if I can find the appropriate subproject for you in Bugzilla.
Yeah.
Well, Chris is doing that.
Thingy. Thank you, Sully. Oh, of course, it decided to change my screen. Okay, here we go. Hopefully, this is it. Tell me what you see, guys.
Here we go. Yep.
All right, let me hit present.
Cool.
And off we go.
Yep. And then I'll just
go ahead, just tell me when.
Yep. Yeah, you can go ahead and it's loading.
Okay, yay.
Excellent.
All right.
Ooh, yeah. So first things, we'll just talk real high level business goals and then some of the challenges associated with Edge. And then we'll talk a bit about OpenShift and some Edge computing architectures and what we have on the table today. We'll talk a couple of edge computing use cases, and then if there's any question and answer, I also have some technical detail towards the end. I am in technical marketing, so we'll start with the fluffy stuff first, and then talk about what actually happens when stuff hits the fan from an edge perspective, and how that may impact how you deploy your applications out there. Mm-hmm. So with that, well, again, fluffy stuff first, helping customers meet their business goals with the edge computing. Anytime you're processing data closer to where it's produced, it's going to give customers faster insights to take actions faster. I just lost the slides.
Oh, shoot. Sorry. I was trying to move something around.
That's okay. So anyway, we can probably roll through to the next slide as well.
Where did it go? Okay, there it is.
Okay. Yep. And some of the key challenges for edge computing at the edge, security is always a big concern for customers, whether it's a legacy infrastructure or any time your attack surface moves out of the data center, it's going to cause concerns, right? Connectivity is also of concern, right? And we'll talk a little bit about either sporadic or disconnected environments for workloads at the edge. And then the other huge thing that you need to be aware about is scale of the number of actual nodes that you're working with when we talk about edge deployments. Data centers usually are in the hundreds of nodes, and it can go up to the tens of thousands of nodes in terms of real customer workloads out at the edge, and maintenance and monitoring of those is a key factor to consider when thinking about edge computing and what your architecture is going to look like. Go ahead.
Yeah. Come on, slides. Jeez,
so, yep. So edge computing, this is kind of what we view edge in a tiered approach, right? So starting with the provider core is the data center, typical data center or regional data center. Moving farther out, we see a provider edge, which is much more kind of a telco edge look and feel, and then all the way out to end user premise edge. And let me caveat, this is an OpenShift only presentation looking at the edge. The farther you go left, the farther RHEL becomes a real possibility as well. And I know those guys have done a ton of work in 8.3 and coming up in 8.4 to really, and that's another stream that should be considered as RHEL at the edge. So the OpenShift focus is kind of the edge endpoint, edge gateway, edge server, end user premise edge. And next slide will show you kind of what exactly this means from a hardware perspective and a scale perspective as well, right? Some of that tier one telco kind of user is going to be a larger 16 core, 128 gig. You'll have hundreds of those. Not really considered, data center, but not far from it. And then we see a tier two is more of a data aggregation. And again, this just gets into kind of the declining hardware capacity and the scale going up at this point, right? So endpoints, telco workloads would be a really good example of this, except they're going to go with a way more core and memory for that particular workload, but you're talking tens of thousands of nodes near the far edge deployment. Okay, next slide.
No, there's animation.
I did not know that. I didn't know that.
Okay, no worries.
So yeah, so OpenShift gives you kind of that consistent platform to develop once and deploy anywhere. And whether that's on a small bare metal footprint or virtualized infra, it gives you, a consistent operation at scale as well with the ACM product that we have, Advanced Cluster Manager. Mm-hmm. There's been a ton of work done on that front as well from an edge perspective. So that's a real key as well. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is kind of where we're at now from a product perspective at Red Hat. Starting, I think, for 5, we offered a 3-node cluster. It's fully HA capable. It gives you the ability to schedule, workloads on control plane nodes, essentially. And we'll get into a little bit more of that. In-place upgrades are available here as well. More recently, I think for 7, we offered a remote worker node environment, which has individual worker nodes displaced from the control plane that are reasonably reliably connected. We'll talk a bit more about what that looks like and what happens when things go wrong between that worker node and the control plane. And available this year is the single node edge server for low bandwidth and disconnected sites. So if you don't need fully HA, OpenShift node and in-place upgrades is a work in progress there as well. So gives you the ability to shrink your footprint even more down to a single node. I believe it's GA in 4.9.
I don't. Yeah, I've heard that before, but I've also heard maybe it's gotten pushed out as well.
It's true too. It depends on the customer. I'm assuming as well. So
specific releases are hard sometimes.
True.
So I want to interrupt you there, Mark,
sure.
And I want to ask/point out, like, a lot of times we talk about edge in the context, like if you go back a slide or two, you don't have to, Chris, but if we think back a couple of slides, like this, the tier 3, and it's like tens of thousands of nodes.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have that type of scale or that type of, a manufacturing plant with PLCs that are deployed, right? Mm-hmm. So you have an edge type of deployment. Retail is another one, right? You think about, a store chain or a restaurant chain that has, hundreds, thousands of nodes. You don't have to have that type of deployment. It could be as simple as, I'm gonna use the word conglomerate, a conglomerate of like lawyers' offices, right? Sure. Where you've got a dozen offices and each one has a little, infrastructure node out in it. And you can use something like a remote worker node to offer them those capabilities, or a single node OpenShift, depending on what it is that happens to be going on out there. What type of apps do they need local access to, that type of stuff. Remote worker nodes to me are some of the most interesting, but also some of the most confusing when it comes to that use case. And I don't remember if you have a slide on it or not around remote worker nodes, but
yeah, there's a couple. Yeah.
Okay. They're fun to me because it's just like any other worker node. There's nothing special about it. There's nothing unique about it. It's literally like, it just happens to be way out at the other end of a link with probably high latency.
Yep.
And yeah, you just want to take some extra considerations with how the workload is scheduled to those nodes.
Exactly. And how you need that node to behave if something does go wrong within kind of the configuration parameters of the cluster itself as well. So yeah, we can talk through a little bit of that too towards the end. But yeah, it's essentially the same. Yep.
Khalid asks, can we run OpenShift single node on premises, not only at the edge?
I guess why?
Yeah,
is the question I have in terms of that.
So I will say yes. Technically, there's nothing you can deploy single node OpenShift wherever you would like.
Sure.
And I know of a couple of partners who do this for their testing. Right. They've integrated it into their CI pipeline so that whenever they do a run, it deploys a single node OpenShift, or in one case, like 10 single node OpenShifts.
Sure.
And then they run through their suite of tests that way. So yes, absolutely you can. That's not the only use case.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Concur completely. Yep.
Can code-ready containers, sorry to interrupt you, Mark, can code-ready containers be considered single node clusters for edge cases?
I would say no, only because CodeReady is really considered kind of a development platform at this point, I guess. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those, like, technically, yes, you can squint and consider it a deployment, but really no. So one, there's a complete lack of support there. Like I don't even know how much community support you would get for something like that. And single node OpenShift is intended to become a fully supported deployment option, right? Today it's in dev preview or tech preview or whatever it is, but it won't be long and it'll be fully supported. Whereas CodeReady containers will never be supported for a production type of use case. It's always meant to be for developers.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, that would be one major reason. The other one being it's because it's targeted at developers. Like, you have to jump through extra hoops to enable external access, stuff like that. So it's maybe if you wanted to do like purely local processing that had no high availability and like lots of other caveats and stuff like that, maybe you could justify it. But again, it would be completely unsupported. Christian had a much stronger reaction.
Yeah. Okay. Let's roll through.
Yeah. Behind the scenes there, it is technically a single node of OpenShift that's running inside of there.
Yep.
Cool.
True.
Next slide.
Yep. Please.
All right.
Yep. So this is kind of just walking through the different options to deploy your 3-node IPI, UPI, and most recently with the assisted installer. And basically, the only thing you're changing from a regular OpenShift install is you're setting your worker replicas to 0 in the install config. And that's basically it. Minimums for each of those nodes would be 6 vCPU, 24 gig RAM, 200 gig storage. And then, that cluster can be expanded at will. And you can add storage nodes. You can remove your worker role from the original control plane if necessary. And those nodes can also be remote workers if need be as well. So,
yeah, there's a couple of things I want to talk about on this slide.
Yep.
So one, going back to the question we had earlier about, what's platform agnostic, or what's the difference with bare metal, or no, was that in here? Maybe that was in a separate, somebody asked me about that earlier today. Anyways, so with 3-node cluster, even though when we announced it back in 4.6 or something like that, like the slide had this big, bare metal only, that's referring to the installation method, the platform agnostic, platform equals none deployment type. Doesn't matter if it's physical or virtual. So as you have on the slide here, right, the minimum system resources is 6 CPUs, 24 gigs of RAM. That can be virtual. It just can't have a cloud provider integration inside of it.
Right.
Somebody else asked me recently of, how do we determine what the, if I'm combining roles, what's the minimum amount of resources? And it's literally, you just add them together. So I think ODF or OCS with 4.8 now supports a compact cluster deployment. So you would want to, if you only have 3 nodes in the cluster, you would want to sum all of those resource requirements together. So for a control plane node, it's 2 or 4 CPUs and 16 gigabytes of RAM. For a worker node, it's 2 CPUs and 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is how we get to 6 and 24 here.
Right.
And for OCS, it's, I don't remember what it is, but it would basically be just add those on top and you reach your minimums.
Yep. Exactly.
The other thing I wanted to highlight, and you kind of already said this, is 3-node cluster, you can absolutely add additional worker nodes after the fact. And you can even go in and you can mark the control plane as non-schedulable after the fact. So that, hey, I started out with this small cluster, things got out of control. Now I have a 50-node cluster, and I don't want the control plane to be scheduling workload anymore. I want it to be focusing on doing control plane things. So
that's very good
schedulability. Single node OpenShift, on the other hand, you cannot add nodes to.
Not yet. No, it's one of the things that we're looking at. And HA, I think, is another thing. A 2-node HA, single node, is another thing that's also being considered. But right now, if that node goes down, that node goes down, and you replace it, and you start from ground zero. So,
here's an interesting thought for you, Mark.
Mhm.
Could I deploy a standard cluster, like a vSphere IPI,
Okay.
and then day 2 mark the control plane as schedulable, and then scale
Ooh.
down the worker nodes?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think that would definitely require a node reboot, but I
Yeah.
don't see. I don't know. Do we test this? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Could that work? I think that possibly could work. Yes.
So that would be one way to get a compact cluster, even though it's not compacted deployment,
Right.
with a cloud provider integration, if you wanted to use like the CSI provisioner or something like that.
That's true.
Huh.
Yeah. Very true. Okay.
Right.
Next slide.
Sure.
Single node. This is available for use or install only with the assisted installer currently, right? So you go to cloud.redhat.com and you can try this today. And via the bare metal assisted installer. It's Dep Preview 4.7, I think in 4.8 as well. All you need to do is check the box. Current minimum requirements, and this may have changed within the last few weeks, is 8 vCPUs and 32 gig of RAM. The ultimate goal is to get this down to two and two
Oh, wow.
vCPUs and 2 gig of RAM.
Man, that's
a
lofty goal.
Yeah.
It's ambitious, yes. And I've been asked to look at writing a blog post on the core node reduction of single node, and it's man, I don't think I had enough physics in college to write that blog post. It's a lot. So anyway, so right now single node assisted installer only. There's your minimums, and I've seen it done on pretty small things like Supermicro E800s, I think. And then I know the public sector has been playing with not single node, but compact clusters on HP, like EL8000. Yeah, the 4-node kind of looking thing that they're adding additional security features to bring that up for some government agencies. So,
got it. Cool.
Yep. Next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, ACM, Advanced Cluster Management. So it's managing, the edge just like the core, right? So it's multi-lifecycle or multi-cluster lifecycle management, some policy-driven governance and risk compliance, and then advanced application lifecycle management as well. And if you want to roll to the next slide real quick, we can get a little bit more in-depth look at what ACM looks like from an edge perspective. And you can kind of see far edge, what's in Kubernetes node control versus the cluster management. As well as, if you've got ACM at the core, also add ACS there as well for, vulnerability analysis and image assurance. This, is going to solve a lot of headaches from a security perspective for those nodes at the edge. So this is just kind of a high level look of what it looks like to manage kind of edge clusters from a core central data center running ACM. One other thing in ACM, tech preview in the latest ACM 2.3 is zero touch provisioning. It's aimed at the regional, distributed and on-prem deployment perspective. So it's going to be an automated path, from getting, uninstalled infrastructure to getting applications on an OpenShift cluster. So you start with site plan, you have your manifests in Git, and then you deploy via ZTP. So it integrates the existing technology stack for ACM, which is Hive, Middlecubed, and the work being done on the assisted installer. The goal for zero touch is minimal prerequisites, right? So hopefully we can get it to the point where untrained technicians can scan a barcode to trigger an install, right? That's the goal. And the deployments can be customized as well here. So it's, connected, disconnected, IPv4, v6, and then DHCP or static IP, and then supports the UPI and IPI deployment framework as well.
Mark, I don't want to cut you off, but
sure. We are at time, aren't we?
Yeah, Chris reminded me we do have a hard stop for the comments.
That's true.
So,
okay, sorry guys.
No worries.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mark. Really appreciate you coming on today. I will share the blog post with you so that way we can make sure we capture all of this information when we publish the blog post later this week.
Okay.
Chris, good luck with that screen share thing there.
Yeah, thanks. That was really weird.
So to our audience, thank you so much for joining us today. Really great conversation. Really appreciate you and all your questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out at any time. You can contact me at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com or on Twitter at practicalandrew. So just like you've seen my username on Twitch there, or rebroadcast across all the others. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, if there's anything we didn't get to today. And with all of that being said, thank you so much. We will see you next week, where we will have Christian on to talk about bring your own Windows host for Windows containers.
Nice. All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.
See you soon.